everyone, my name is Madeleine Looyen. I'm working for the Dutch animal welfare organization Eyes on Animals. And today we will be giving you a presentation about calming the catch. So it's all about catching and loading of broilers. So first, a little bit about our organization. So Eyes on Animals is an international inspection and consultancy organization. And we're focused on the welfare of farm animals. And we have a hands-on approach to reduce suffering together with industry stakeholders. So during our inspections of poultry trucks on the highway, but also at arrival at the slaughterhouse, we regularly witnessed major issues. I'm going to show you a few. So what we saw are birds with wings that are trapped, heads that are crushed, major injuries, and birds that were lying on their backs. Often they're dead at the final destination, the slaughterhouse. So this for us was a reason to start investigating the catching and loading of birds, to start to see where the causes are of these injuries. So this is how it typically looks like, the catching and loading of laying hens. So we witnessed that the conventional catching method is catching the birds by the legs, one leg at a time, and then pulling it from the housing system. So these are laying hens. So this is an aviary system. And in broilers, you'll have floor housing systems. But in general, you see the same typical reaction, that birds are flapping their wings, try to upright themselves, and they vocalize a lot. So there's a typical panic reaction. So the question is, why should we bother? Of course, in my opinion, animal welfare is something that each farmer, each supermarket, and each consumer should be taken responsibility for. But there are also a lot of people who would say, well, it's just a short period of time and they are slaughtered anyway. We hear these arguments a lot. But besides welfare, catching injuries also are a major financial loss. Even if you're talking about a few percentages, then it means like millions of birds are being trimmed or are being discarded. So that is kind of a major financial loss for the industry. So as a farmer, weeks of good stockmanship can be undone in just a few hours of poor catching. So you spend weeks of taking care of your birds the best way you can, and then a few hours of catching undo most of that work. And a second reason to care is also that a calm flock is much easier to handle. Birds that are calm are easier to catch, so it saves time and frustration. And especially in laying hens, but also in the slower growing breeds, you don't want to run behind chickens because they're all in panic. You don't want to look like this at the end of the evening. So to calm the catch, we first need to know a little bit more about the behavior of birds and also about the perception of a chicken. So what do we actually know about chickens? So when we are talking about the eyesight of chickens, do you think that they see as well as humans see? Do they see the world in the same way as we do? If you look at the birds, they have their eyes positioned on the side of their heads, like many farm animals. And this means that they have a very wide field of vision. They can see almost all around them. So when a predator is reaching the bird from behind, it can see it well, so it has a function as a prey animal. And what's also very interesting is that the eyes can focus on different tasks at the same time. So they can focus independently. So the left eye can focus on something else than the right eye. And what I also find very fascinating is that birds do more observations per second than humans. A lot more, to be honest. So they see 150 to 200 images per second, while humans, we only perceive 25 to 30 images per second. But what does this mean, you might think? Well, it means that fast movements to birds look way more flickery. So if we move our arms or we run during the catching, then it will really cause stress in the flock because it looks very flickering to them. And if you look at the feet of chickens, they even have special sensors in their feet to detect motion, to detect vibrations via the floor. And they also have them in their legs and in their beak. So they're very sensitive to vibrations. So before you see the chickens already hear you coming. They already feel you coming via these vibrations that they can detect very well. So if you look at the hearing of birds, that's also quite interesting because also in hearings, birds perform quite well in comparison to people. So if you look at this graph, you will see that birds can hear lower frequency sounds a lot better than we do. It means that they hear things that we don't hear. And it's especially sounds of machinery or of the weather. So if you're using a machine that runs on diesel, then it can really cause stress within a flock. And also lightning and other weather conditions, birds often feel it coming way earlier than we do. And it can cause stress. And if you look at the most sensitive hearing range, it will be around 2000 hertz. And people screaming, shouting is around that range. So it means that when you scream and when you shout, especially when you do it suddenly, it's very stressful to a bird. It will cause panic in your flock and it will make catching much more difficult. So one of the things we always tell to catchers is to be as calm as possible in sound, but also in movements. Just be relaxed amongst the birds, then the birds are also much more relaxed. So let's go into details on the catching and loading of birds. So we have visited a lot of farms during the catching and loading. And in the next slides, I want to share with you our main concerns. But first, before I go into detail, I want to imagine yourself being in this farm, being a chicken catcher. So you're standing in the middle of this broiler house, and you're with 5 colleagues, and you need to catch all of these birds, each individual weighing about 2.7 kilos, and all of them must be loaded. And you need to do it quick. You need to be fast. The slaughterhouse is pushing you. The transporter is pushing you. Well, that's the job of a chicken catcher. But a lot of people don't really know what it is to be a chicken catcher. So what do we know about the job of a catcher? On average, they work 5 to 8 hours a day, but this is really, really hard work because they have to carry 6 birds at a time, bring them to the container, load them, and then continue for 5 to 8 hours. But we know from catching companies that sometimes they have to work for 11 hours. So it's very, very difficult work. And the conditions are also not optimal. It's often dark. The barns can be dirty. And from a study done by ILVO, it's a Belgian research center, they have interviewed a lot of catchers, and the result they found out that 8 to 10% of the catchers use painkillers, and 8 to 40% of them experienced work-related injuries. So I find this quite shocking. So within this interview of ILVO, they also asked the slaughterhouses and the transporters, what is the ideal catching method, according to you? And what do you think that they answered? The answer was as fast as possible. So the slaughterhouses, as well as the transport companies, they put enormous pressure on the catching team to work very fast. And in the Netherlands, and I think it's similar to a lot of European countries, 6,000 birds have to be loaded within 45 minutes. So that's really a lot. And this focus on getting the job done very quickly causes a lot of frustration, especially thinking about that after this farm that I just showed you a picture of, they have to visit another farm. It's not just one farm that they have to depopulate, but are often several farms after each other. So my point is that calming the catching process, it's not only about animal welfare, but it's also about human. So it may not come as a surprise that the work being a chicken catcher, it can make you lose your patience and empathy because you're dealing with suffering on a daily basis and you're working under a lot of pressure. And this makes you like dull. It makes you like compassion fatigue. It's actually a term that's also used in hospitals. It's a state of like emotional exhaustion that dulls empathy. And I think that also happens during chicken catching. So sometimes you can ask yourself, are we asking the impossible by putting these catchers under such pressure and asking them to still do this in a very welfare friendly method? Maybe it isn't possible if you're under that much pressure, if you have to deal with such large flocks. And also already from very old studies, I mean, it is known that catchers that are encouraged to load very quickly are actually a major cause of very poor welfare. So this is a conclusion from Donald Broom from the University of Cambridge. but also for more recent studies, a quite recent one from Wageningen University, the conclusions were similar, that faster catching results in more injuries. So maybe we should slow down the catch. So yes, I was talking about our main concerns. Well, one of the things that also concerns us is if you look at the catching method, it always causes a panic reaction. And it's very typical, and it's the same in broilers as in laying hens, that when you catch the bird by his or her leg, then you will see that the bird will start to flap her wings. She will try to upright herself. She will vocalize. She will actually scream, and she will fight for her life because she's a prey animal. And she feels like she's being eaten by a predator. So there is a lot of stress. And this is a video, I think. Yeah. So this video, it was filmed in Germany, and the catches, they were actually within the current way of catching. They were doing it as calm as they could. But even though they were relatively calm, you can still see this panic reaction, because the method itself, it causes panic, it causes fear, even though you do it quite calmly. But we know from undercover footage made by other organizations that, like, putting the birds in, like you saw in the previous video, is also done in a much more rough way when no one is watching. So what you saw in this video is something that happens very often, that the birds are thrown from a distance inside the containers, inside the transport containers. It's quite common to do it that way. And the risk is that if you throw them in from a distance, and this is one of our concerns for broiler catching, is that the birds will hit the container edges. As you can see in this photo, the edges are made of metal, and you can imagine that if this bird flies against it, it will cause injuries, it will cause pain. And there's another concern seen in this photo, if you look very well. And then you see here in the corner, so in the left corner, you see a bird lying on its back. And this is also something that happens more when you you load in a very rough way, and when you throw them in from a distance. And if a bird is lying on her back, like you can see here, so these are all photos made during our inspections. These birds often die during transport, and it's not like a sudden death. They really struggle. They struggle for air. They are being trampled by the others. So it's a period of suffering that should really be prevented. So I just told you about, like, throwing the birds in from a distance, and then you have this risk that you throw them against the edges of the container. And this risk is especially high when the drawers of a container is too low, which you can clearly see in this photo. You can see that the broiler is much uh, it's much taller than the size of the container drop, than the height of the container drop. So in these kind of containers, and this is a very common container, commonly used in Europe, but a lot of containers have not enough headspace. And this is not only an issue for heat stress, but it's also an issue for loading the birds, that there is a higher risk of injuries. And in broilers, this is especially wing injuries. And also with mechanic loading, like with a machine, when the birds are catapulted out of the machine, if the drawers are too low, then there's a much higher risk of wing injuries. So the point is that the design of the containers really have to be good. They really need to be good. And another issue, if the drawer isn't high enough, that you crush the heads when you close them. And this video also shows what a difficult task it is to load these birds. You can see it's very difficult to close down the drawer and at the same time push all the heads down and prevent heads from getting stuck in between. It's very difficult, and sometimes the drawers are even wider and the job gets even more difficult, or they are even lower. So the design of the containers really have a big impact on welfare. And this is another example of a very poor designed container, where there was a very high risk of heads getting crushed and stuck. And what is also increasing the risk of injuries in birds, but also in catchers, is when the containers are poorly maintained. So here you can see a container that's very poorly maintained. So closing containers that have metal bendings everywhere, it's sometimes almost impossible. And then you need to think about all these birds that are inside, and you need to push them down at the same time and get this drawer back into the frame. And you will also get catchers who pinch their fingers. So again, human welfare and animal welfare, they often go at the same time, if you know what I mean. So a lot of the containers nowadays, they are 4 drawers high. And this highest drawer, the fourth, I mean 5. They are 5 drawers high. So I said 4, but I meant 5. So 5 is actually very high. So as you can see in this photo, you can see that the catcher, they have to lift the birds above shoulder height. And imagine doing this for thousands of birds. You will definitely get very tired, but you also make more mistakes and you have more birds hitting the container edges. Because after a while, you just get tired. And that's something that's also concluded from research from our own official authorities that do the inspections in the Netherlands. in slaughterhouses, and they concluded that birds located in the fifth drawer, so in the highest drawer, they have more injuries because they hit the container edges more. And what also makes a big influence is the weight of the birds. So the heavier the birds, the more difficult it is to load them. So leg issues, they're quite common in broilers. And you can imagine that if you lift broilers by their legs while they have leg issues, leg disorders, this can increase their pain. So also for this reason, we think catching them by the leg is not good for animal welfare. And then you also have this issue that birds, they lack a diaphragm. So they do not have a diaphragm like we do. So when they are held upside down, all the organs, they press against the lungs and the air sacs, and it can compromise breathing. And also the heart activity, because all the weight is getting on the lungs and the air sacs. And this is another video. You can see that this floor is very slippery, making it very difficult for the birds to sit comfortably. And we see there's a lot that containers have very slippery floors. Especially also during long waiting times when they get more wet. That's an issue we see that we are concerned about. And during our inspections, we also see a lot of unfit birds. While for cattle and pigs, we know that unfit animals are not allowed to be transported. In birds, we still commonly see that they are being loaded and transported despite several issues like leg disorders that make it difficult for them to walk without pain, but also major injuries. We see them especially in broiler breeders. Injuries are a reason for animals to not be allowed for transport, but nevertheless, in birds, this still happens. And we think officials should be more concerned about that and should enforce on the current legislation that says that animals are not allowed to be transported if they are unfit, because this regulation also applies to poultry. There's no exception for poultry. So as a farmer, you are responsible to euthanize these birds before the catching team arrives. And of course, in such a big barn, you can sometimes miss a bird. That's human, of course. And that makes it also important for the catchers to be aware of these birds. So if you see any bird with an injury or a bird that's clearly feeling unwell, you should separate the birds or hand it over to the farmer. It's very important for farmers also to be present during the catching. So this is a new project of ours, is that we also would like these birds that are unfit, sick, are unwell during production and at the end of their life, when the catching team arrives, that they should be killed in a humane way. Nowadays, often cervical dislocation is used, and cervical dislocation causes pain. It's often thought that it doesn't cause pain, but it does. There have been a lot of studies showing that there's still awareness in these birds for a couple of seconds and sometimes even tens of seconds. And You are breaking the neck of a conscious bird, and it's very clear that this causes pain. So what you would like is that this bird is rendered unconscious immediately. And for this, you have different machines, tools, like a captive ball tool, run on cartridges or on air. And you also have electric stunners, and they work well. So we are now busy with a project to stimulate farmers to make them enthusiastic to use these humane killers, because they are not only beneficial for animal welfare, but they also make the job much easier. So in Ghana, we also work a lot in slaughterhouse. We introduce stunning there in cattle slaughterhouses and pig slaughterhouses, but also in poultry slaughterhouses. We use the severe poultry stunner, and it works really well. It prevents so much suffering. So let's go to upright catching. We started a project in upright catching already 10 years ago in 2016. And some of you might ask yourself, well, why would upright catching be better? Why is that better for the bird? So to explain this, I would like to play an audio fragment. And the question is, what do you hear? So you could hear a little bit of small noises from birds, and you think, oh, they might be walking in a garden and exploring a little bit. But actually, this audio fragment was made during catching. It was a farm in Germany, and it shows you how calm it could be during upright catching. Because you catch upright, the birds feel much more comfortable and they produce a lot less noise. So let's listen to this audio fragment. What do you hear in this one? So yes, this was conventional catching. It was in a laying hen farm, and it immediately makes very clear that there's a huge difference in between upright catching and conventional catching, alone by listening to the sound of the birds. And that was actually also the most convincing to the farmers that now use upright catching, is that there's way less sound. The birds really tell you that they are less stressed. And that feels good as a farm. So already from very old studies, so this one was from Donald Broom. He did a study and compared conventional catching, so by one leg, and he compared it with upright catching, and he saw that the birds that were caught upright produced way less stress hormones. And this study for us was also a reason to try out this upright catching. But in the meantime, there were a lot of studies on catching. You can find a lot of them. And this very recent one from Wageningen University and many others also conclude that upright catching results in less injuries compared to the standard catching method, but also compared to mechanical catching and loading from a patio system. That's a farming system here in the Netherlands, where part of the catching is automatically. And if you look at legislation, the EU legislation, there's even an article saying that it's prohibited to lift or drag animals by their legs. And there is no exceptions for birds in the current legislation. So right now, it's actually not allowed to lift birds by the legs in Europe. Nevertheless, it's the common and conventional methods. I know this, but if you really look at legislation, the letter says it's not allowed. And this was a reason for an NGO in the Netherlands called Wakker Dier to start a court case. And they asked our minister to start enforcing this EU prohibition on leg catching. And the Dutch Court of Appeal, that's already 2 years ago, it ruled that lifting birds by their leg is indeed prohibited under the current EU regulation. So they agreed with the organization, and they said that the minister, our Dutch minister, should enforce. So in the Netherlands, there was a lot of commotion due to this ruling by the courts. And there wasn't there at the same time, there was also a new proposal for the transport regulation. And the strange thing is that in this new transport regulation, in which you expect welfare to become better, there is now an exception for lifting birds by their legs. So the new transport legislation, which is not ready, it's actually not enforced yet. So it's still in a lot of discussion, and it's not clear if this is becoming like the real law. But in the proposal, it does say that birds can be caught by their legs if they are supported by their breasts, and if they are carried by always 2 legs. Our officials, due to this proposal, said, okay, we will not enforce the current prohibition if the proposed regulation is being met by industry. So it's quite complicated, this whole court case. So our officials, they denied to enforce the current prohibition because they said, well, there's a new proposal, and it says that it is allowed. Well, I asked ChatGPT to make me a picture of how it would look like to carry 3 broilers in each hand and support them with your knee or your upper leg at the same time. I don't know how a cat can walk like this. So it is actually a little bit silly article in this new proposal, because you cannot like support the birds and at the same time walk. Then you have to like, I don't know if there's I don't know the English word for that, but then you have to walk like on one leg. So the Dutch NGO Wakker Dier has already appealed this authority's decision, and they are now awaiting the ruling of the Dutch court. And it's expected quite soon, July 7th. So let's go to upright catching and loading of broilers, the more practical part of this presentation. How does it look like? Well, it's not very complex. It's actually how everyone with a few chicken in his or her garden would hold his chicken. It's simply holding your hands around the wings, one bird at a time, sometimes max if they are not too big. And by holding them around the wings, you prevent the bird from flapping, but you also keep the bird in its natural upright position, keeping the bird much more calm. And you do not squeeze, of course. You just hold it gently around the wings. And if you have very large broilers, then it's sometimes difficult to hold two at a time. This photo is actually me. My hands are too small to hold two broilers at the same time and keep my thumbs around the wings. So I cannot load two birds at a time because then the wings are loose. And you also don't want to press them too much against each other. But my colleague who has bigger hands, she can do it very easily. So it really depends on your hands and the size of your hands. So let's watch a video on upright catching of broilers. So as you can see, it goes quite easily. Here's a bit of the loading. So putting them into the container system. And an interesting fact, which some of you might already know, but most of the broilers in Brazil, and Brazil is of course the largest producer in the world, and most of the broilers there, they are cut upright because they noticed that meat quality was much better when the birds were held upright. Lower mortality, less injuries. So this is a video of broiler catching in Brazil. So they use crates, and you can see that works very well as well. And here the broilers are quite small, so you can easily grab them two at a time. And you can also see it goes quite fast. So what's that going to cost? Is it much more expensive to load birds in an upright manner? Well, there have been a few studies on them, amongst others from Ilvo and Wageningen University. And catching broilers in an upright manner takes about 1.5 up to 2.2 times longer than conventional catching. And the catching of laying hens is 1.7 times longer. And this is comparable to what we have experienced as well. That for laying hens, it's about 1.7 times longer. And for broilers, it's like on average about 2 times longer. And the farmers that now catch upright in the Netherlands, which are a couple, quite a few actually, they use more catchers to make sure that the total catching time does not increase. So you're finished in the same time that you are used to, and the broilers do not have to be on board of this truck for an unnecessary long time. So ILFO also researched how much more it would cost to catch upright for broilers, and it is about 1.2 cents per kilogram more expensive. And for eggs, it's 0.05 cents per egg more expensive. So Raisin Animals have been giving trainings to several catching companies in the Netherlands, but also in Belgium and Germany, even in the US, in England. So we have been giving trainings to several catching companies, and a training means like a theoretical part in which we discussed the design of the containers, and we also use the information of the catches to try and make improvements from within, because they often know best. They know best which designs work well and which designs don't. So a lot of information in this presentation is also based on their experience. So part of the training is theoretical, in which we together discuss like the issues and how stress and panic can be reduced. But there's also a large part of the training is practical. And together we are catching a lot of chickens. And I noticed that this is really crucial also to know what works well and what doesn't work, what is practical, what is better for animal welfare. You only know like the answer when you have done it yourself. And I can tell you catching is a really, really, really hard job. From my own experience, I can tell you that. So these are the companies in the Netherlands that catch uprights, and they have done that for several years now. And the main reason that they switched to upright catching is because they saw the flock is much more calm. So we're almost at the final part. We're almost at the final part of my presentation. So about machine catching. So machine catching also happens quite a lot in the Netherlands. An estimation is about like 20% in the Netherlands of the broilers are caught by a machine. This is often the Apollo catching machine. And the catching itself, it goes quite fast. So it's about 6,000 birds an hour. And you only need 4 people. So you need less people than with manual catching, which you normally will have teams like 6 to 8 people. So this saves time and it saves people. But of course, you have the costs of a catching machine. I think the cost of a catching machine is about 250,000 at the moment. So in the Netherlands, the farmer sometimes rents the machine or the catching company. And some farmers, they own an own catching machine. And because you need a catching machine, or you need to hire one, or you need to buy one, the costs per kilo are a little bit more than manual catching. But of course, if you buy a machine yourself as a farmer, then at some point it will be less expensive, of course. So looking at catching machines, we do think they have potential because you do not have to touch the birds. You do not have to grab your birds. And the birds, of course, they remain in an upright position throughout the whole process. But depending on how the catching machine is being used, and several other factors, the injuries can be lower or sometimes also higher. So there are several key factors that really make a catching machine a good option or not. So if you have a catching machine, it's crucial that you operate it in a very professional way. So I'm going to talk a little bit about these key factors. How should you operate a catching machine? And now I realize that this is a video that I would like to play. So this is just to give you an idea of how this catching machine looks like. So the birds, they go onto a belt, and this brings them to a funnel, some kind of corridor with also a belt underneath, and then the birds are loaded into the machine. So I don't know if you saw it well enough in the video, but the quality of the catching really depends on the design of the container. So in this video, if you scroll back, you could see that blue drawer containers were being used. And these blue drawers were only pulled out halfway. And if you only pull them out halfway, then you have more chance that the birds hit the container above it. And the reason that they only pull it open halfway is because this drawer it's otherwise too heavy to push it back. So this is again a design issue. We need to use drawer systems that are easy to use for the catchers, so they are used in the most optimal way. Because if you have poor container design, like very heavy drawers or drawers with a very small opening, then you will have more injury. Here you see another design of a container. And I will go one time to show you. So if you look at this photo now, this screenshot of the video, you can see that the lid of the catching machine goes into the drawer. And this lid, so this conveyor belt, you should move it from left to right to make sure that the distribution of the birds is evenly. So this is the Marel Atlas system. The advantage is that the drawers are quite wide, and you also don't have to push full drawers inside because you close the drawer from the top. But it's important that you move the lids, like the belt of this machine, from left to right to prevent smothering of the birds. So you don't want them all to be put on top of each other, right? So you can imagine if these things are not taught to the operator, or if someone uses the machine without having this professional skills, that you will have more injuries and you will have more stress. And the same counts for heavy birds. When you have very heavy birds, and I mean like 3 kilos or even more, then you need to slow down the bell speeds. Because these birds, they are less mobile, they are less fast, and they need more time, and they also need more space to regain their footing. So you can imagine then if a very heavy bird ends up on her back, then it's more difficult to get back up for such a bird than it is for a bird that is more mobile. So that's something you should really think about when using a machine. It's all about these operating skills. So you need like 2 people operating the machine, but you also need like 2 people that are responsible for making sure that everything goes well. And also if you have very large flocks, in general with catching, you always need to make sure that your catchers do not get tired, frustrated, angry, impatient, all human things, but you need to prevent them from happening. So if you have a very large flock, also with machine catching, you need to make sure that you have enough people so you can switch teams. So I think I already told this like throughout the slides that good training, it's crucial, and it's not only about theory, but it's also about practicing, about learning from a professional, learning from someone who operates very well, and that you do not yet use the system to the max, but that you are like aware of all these things that influence like the injury rates and the DOA rates amongst your flock. So what we sometimes see is that these machines are set at a too high level or too high speeds. And this will cause problems. You need to have like professionals that feel responsible to prevent this from happening. Yes, so I would like to end this presentation with this very interesting video of harvesting apples. So you have seen now a lot of videos of catching birds, and I think it's crazy that the way we harvest apples is more gentle than the way we catch birds. Even though that birds are sentient beings and they need our respect, because they it's about reciprocity. It's about like giving them or sparing them at least the most suffering as possible, because they have given us a lot of eggs or meat. So the least we can do is, make the catching, the loading, the transport, and the slaughter as calm as possible to them. Thanks a lot for caring. If you have any questions, please, you can email me if you're interested in a training as well. It's here below in the slides. Thank you.